Hi there and welcome to the Tour Guides Travel Guides. My name is Rich Jones, professional tour guide. You can trust me. Today we broadcast from the magnificent university city of Oxford, affectionately known as the City of Dreaming Spires, a term coined by the great poet Matthew Arnold. The city itself goes back to ancient times, Anglo-Saxon in fact. The original name was Ox-Enna-Forda. It's quite literal actually. It's where the ancient drovers used to be able to ford their oxen en route to the meat markets of London, just about 60 miles southeast of here. Obviously today Oxford known as the oldest university in the English-speaking world, dating from the 13th century. Now here's the thing you need to understand is that Oxford University is the governing body of a collection of 39 separate independent colleges. So to avoid any confusion, there isn't a central campus. Essentially the city itself is the campus of Oxford University. So if you're interested, why don't you join us? Okay, so allow us to show you Oxford our way. Any logical way of doing this tour really should start right here. Adjacent, in fact, to the world famous RANDOLPH Hotel. Inside the RANDOLPH, the Morse Bar apparently sells the world's finest Long Island iced tea, if you like a little tipple. We're adjacent to Beaumont Street, heading down towards Worcester College. And it's actually in Beaumont Street that two English kings were born, King Richard Lionheart and his brother Bad King John. We're adjacent to the world famous and world class ASHMOLEAN Museum, beautifully refurbished. We're situated at the base of St Giles, the main drag into the city from the north, and it's on St Giles to the left hand side. Slightly further up is the world famous Eagle and Child, that famous pub I must visit. Adjacent on the right hand side of course the Lamb and Flag. Now a word of caution guys, if you're walking around Oxford, please be careful. The mode of transport for the students, bicycles, and they are everywhere, and they don't care. They do not care. Their favourite sport is tourist baiting, so wherever possible, please stay on what we in this country call the pavement. In America, the sidewalk, footpath in Australia, whatever you call that thing over there, stay on it and stay away from the bicycles. This is critically important. We're adjacent also to Oxford's most famous and certainly important monument, the Martyrs Memorial. Alright, so behind us we've got CORNMARKET, the main pedestrian street in Oxford, and as the name suggests, back in the day, or even back to Saxon times, the CORNMARKET, the main commercial street in Oxford. Famous today for this beautiful building behind us, St Michael Northgate Tower. In fact, the oldest building in Oxford, dating from the 11th century. Go up there, get some great views from the top actually, just a couple of quid. It's in there that the three Oxford martyrs were held captive during their trials, held at St Mary the Virgin Church. In fact, you can go in there and actually still see the very same cell door that they were locked up behind. Also in there, you've got a very interesting 15th century pulpit that the founder of Methodism, John Wesley, student at Christ Church, fellow of Lincoln College, actually gave a sermon in 1726. I think it was September the 29th or something, but very interesting building indeed, the St Michael at Northgate, Oxford's oldest building. So if we come over here a little bit, just pointing out this beautiful timbered building on the corner of CORNMARKET and Ship Street, once upon a tavern. But if we go back 400 or 500 years ago, most cities of Britain would have looked exactly like that. That was a traditional way of house building, but something happened in London in 1666, the Great Fire of London that decimated about 2/3 of the city, where a rule and regulation came in that any built-up communities of importance such as a varsity town like Oxford, you had to build in stone. And that's what they did. So a lot of these college buildings now date from round about 1600s, 1700s, something like that. Ship Street on the corner of CORNMARKET. Well, yeah, well, here we are, busy, busy, busy. This is the central crossroads called CARFAX. Corners of CORNMARKET, High Street, St Aldate, and of course Queen Street. Essentially, this is where it all began, the beginning of it all, the crossroads. And CARFAX comes from the French carrefour, four ways, or the Latin quadrifurcus. We've got St Martin's Tower here, built on the site of a 12th century church. We'll see some folks up there actually, Greg, you see that? This tower is actually 74 feet high, and there is a statute that says that no building built in central Oxford can actually be taller than that. But I'm looking around, looking at Oriel Church and certainly St Mary the Virgin, they're certainly tight. So when that law came in, I don't know, but it is a decree from there somewhere. You can get tours up there, a couple of quid I think, to get inside and get some decent views of Oxford and the Dreaming Spires. And lovely little clock there actually. Those little mechanical figures, they'll ring those bells every quarter of the hour, so you might want to come down and check that out. Very nice. So CARFAX, four ways. Okay, really wanted to show you this actually. We're talking about ONFORD, the name originally Oxford, okay, but this brings it to life. You've got there the city crest, the red ox crossing the heraldic symbol for water, so ONFORD, where those drovers could ford their cattle en route to London at the shallow crossing point of the River Thames that flows through the city of Oxford. In fact, this section that flows through, we'll see it later on, is actually called the Isis, and it comes from the Latin tam isis. So the red ox, heraldic symbol for the city of Oxford. Behind me on the right hand side is the coat of arms of the county of Oxfordshire. And so continuing the theme of the crest, we're actually in the entranceway of the town hall here on St Aldate, but a royal crest over my left shoulder here, the current one, the Lions of England, the red lion rampant of Scotland, of course the harp of Ireland, the present day crest. Interesting one for you here actually, we've got an opportunity to steal a bit noisy. That is actually the crest of the University of Oxford, that governing body, not the colleges. So you've got the three crowns representing the three divinities, and you've got the open book, the Latin inscription Dominus te illumi, the Lord my light, which you could actually translation basically to illumination through education. So the crest of Oxford University right there, the dark blue background. Alright, so we find ourselves just off St Aldate, the main drag south, and we're actually outside the main gateway of, I would say certainly now Oxford's most celebrated college, that is Christ Church and Christ Church Gateway. Beautiful tower there, it's known as Great Tom. Tom is actually the bell inside there, okay. The college dates from 1525, the tower in the 17th century, Sir Christopher Wren construction, more of him later on. Let's say the college was founded in 1525 by a man called Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. He was the right-hand man of the celebrated King Henry VIII I am. Okay, originally it was called Cardinal College until Wolsey fell out of favour with his lord and master Henry VIII when he failed to achieve a divorce from Henry and his first wife Catherine of Aragon. So Henry, not best pleased with Wolsey, he said, off you go, out you go, I'm going to take over the founding of Christ Church, and he renamed it the House of Jesus Christ at Oxford. And to this very day it's known by the locals here as the House. Another important thing to remember, it is just Christ Church. It's not Christ Church College, just Christ Church. The reason being, college would take away the emphasis of the word church. So if anybody tells you, that they were at Christ Church College, you can tell them they're lying, but they didn't. Right. Now, while we're here, is if you're overnighting in Oxford, come down here about 9 o'clock, or in fact 9:05 in the evening, because you will hear Tom the bell toll 101 times. And the reason for that is, when this college was founded in the 16th century, there were 101 students and there was a 9 o'clock curfew. So as the students returned, the bell tolled to count them back in. So when they got 101 in, they could lock those doors. It's a tradition that lasts a day. Now, you might have noticed that I actually said 5 after 9. Well, that's true, because that's Oxford time. The mathematicians here in the 16th century calculated, because we're about not quite 60 miles northwest of London, there's a 5-minute time delay. They still operate on Oxford time today. So, great, Tom. 5 after 9. Now we're going to try and get in there later on the tour and actually see Tom Quad, which is the largest quad here in the colleges of Oxford. In fact, Christ Church is the largest college by a long way of the 39 in Oxford. Over 600 students in there. Okay, little point of interest for you souvenir shoppers, and that's just across the way, number 83, St Aldate. So you can just make out the sign there, a red sign, and Alice's shop. Now, it's in there that a certain Alice Liddell used to go and buy her sweets and candies back in the day. Now, the story of this is that her father was a man called Henry Liddell. Now, Henry Liddell was the dean of the college here at Christ Church, which we'll be going into shortly. Now, associated with this college was a man called Charles Lutwidge Dodson. Very shy and private man, much more comfortable in the company of children. Befriended Alice Liddell and wrote her stories, influenced by actions and people and characters all associated with Oxford and particularly Christ Church. For example, Alice's father, Henry Liddell, had a habit after meal times at the dining hall, would look at his pocket watch and go, "Tut tut, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late," and would scuttle off down a doorway, down the stairs. There was another master, elderly language teacher, I believe, had a tendency of falling asleep in his soup. You might have worked it out by now. Charles Lutwidge Dodson was in fact Lewis Carroll. So all those stories of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass are greatly inspired by all we see around us, particularly Alice's shop. So down by the waterside here, known as the head of the River Thames flowing through Oxford, and I said before that this section of the River Thames, known locally as the Isis, and it comes from the Latin Tamesis, is what the Latin-speaking countries still refer to the Old Father Thames, and lots of activity, obviously not in a cold January day, but normally a hive of activity. So one of many things you could do on a fine summer's day is come down to the river to these many boating stations, hire a boat, whether it be a rowboat, little motorboat, or particularly the traditional flat-bottomed punt, where you steer your boat with this huge rod. You punch down into the water and propel yourself along that way. But nice pub here as well ahead of the river. But the Isis, where sport plays a very big part in college life here, and one of the biggest sports here, of course, is rowing. Huge competition between the colleges themselves, and best represent the varsity as a whole. And of course, the very famous Oxford and Cambridge University boat race every April down the River Thames. Actually, while we're on the subject of sports, actually, we're just at Oxford and Cambridge. I should tell you, actually, if we're in Oxford, we've got to keep that quiet. We can't actually mention the word Cambridge. We're walking around Oxford. We've got to refer to them as the other place. All right, the other place. Talking about that, if you represent your college at a particular sport, all well and good, and then you're looked at by the varsity as a whole, and if you actually represent the varsity at a particular sport, let's say it is rowing, you achieve what's called a varsity blue. And the reason for that is the colours of Oxford and the other place are blue, so be very careful you're actually shopping for souvenirs, because the colour of Oxford is dark blue and the blue of the other place is light blue, so be very careful which shade of blue you're buying when it's in Oxford. Right then, well, we've moved across the High Street and we've actually come into Radcliffe Square right here. Now, behind me we have the beautiful St Mary the Virgin University Church. Now, I think I explained early on that all of these separate colleges have their own chapels for kind of in-house services and the like, but major university services would be held here. 15th century building. It was in here, incidentally, that the trial, those three martyrs we've been talking about, Cranmer, Ridley and Latimer, took place in the years 1555 and 1556. Now, for your information, you can go in there and actually get up and take a tower tour. It's going to cost you £4, but I highly advise it's not for the faint-hearted. It's quite a difficult walk up the top. And before you get out onto the balcony, there's a very, very narrow spiral staircase, and there's a lot of people up there. It could be actually quite unnerving. It gets very congested up there. So if you were going to go in, I would kind of suggest check with the helpful lady behind the desk about how many people are actually up there. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's actually quite a workout for you. It goes around 3 sides. However, the rewards are mighty, because the views of the Dreaming Spires is quite remarkable. In fact, our opening shots were from the gallery just above there, overlooking Oxford itself. Okay, so Radcliffe Square, it's named after Daniel Radcliffe. Nah, not really. Dr. John Radcliffe, an Oxford man, arose to very senior prominence in the medical industry, so much so that he was actually personal physician to the kings and queens. Made an awful lot of money. Now, at his death, he bequeathed a vast sum of money to bequeath back to the university itself as a kind of like thank you very much for giving me a start in this fantastic career of mine. And he had an idea that an extension to the Bodleian Library, where we're actually headed, should have a reading room. Now, the square was laid out itself between 1737 and 1748. And included in that was this beautiful building here, the Radcliffe Camera. The camera comes from the word chamber, reading room, the Radcliffe Camera. Finished, as I say, in about 1748. It's also known as the Physics Library. It's also known as the Radcam. That's the Radcliffe Camera. Probably one of the most iconic buildings in this beautiful city of Dreaming Spires. Designed by James Gibbs, built very much in that classical English Palladian style, and we're really starting to get a real perception of this beautiful limestone that Oxford is famous for. It's an oolitic limestone, Cotswold stone. We're actually here in Oxford, we're at that south east tip of an area of outstanding natural beauty called the Cotswolds. More of that later. But a lot of these architectural influences were coming from those classical European cities, and particularly in that part of the mid to late 1700s and early 1800s. Palladian style was all the rage. Now, there is a bit of an urban legend behind this. You'll notice that the roof, if I get Greg to pan the camera up top, you'll see it's a sort of copper and metal roof up there. That Gibbs's original design was to have it completely stoned over, but Gibbs died before the completion, and it's said that to actually make a stone dome is incredibly difficult. So the urban legend, of course, is this: look, guys, Gibbs is gone, we just stick a metal roof on. It's a lot easier and a lot cheaper. But the Radcliffe Camera, absolutely stunning, and as I say, probably one of the most famous buildings in Oxford. Okay, just about to head into the Bodleian Library, but just wanted to show you guys the main entrance here, and particularly emotive is the fact that you've got the doors here made out of oak. These are the original doors dating from 1610 when this place was founded, and there's one on either side. You can see some crests around the doorway. There's in fact 17 of them. That's the amount of colleges that were actually here in existence in 1610 before we go in. But if you come in this way, check it out, because they are original, beautiful oak doors. Very nice indeed. So great, inside the world famous Bodleian Library. This section here is known as the old school's quad. Again, that quad, 4 sides, and these were, if you like, the original classrooms. And if we look at the doorways, we just talked about Christopher Wren before, but in the far corner, Schola, Astronomy, Rhetoric, School of Astronomy and Rhetoric. That's where Wren was teaching. Again, today we follow the line across. You've got the School of Music, School of Natural Philosophy, Logic, across the way Metaphysics, languages over there, which at the day would have been, you know, Greek, Latin, Hebrew, the classic languages. One of the most famous things here in the old school's quad is what we call the Tower of the Five Orders. This remarkable tower rising up, just glowing in the sunlight. And what we've got here is, if you like your architecture, all architectural styles come from 5 basic orders. The columns we're talking about: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Tuscan and Composite, and that is unique to have the 5 orders in one place at the same time. Sitting up there, gazing down below us, sat on his throne, is the King of England at the time that this place was founded. 1610, we had King James I of England, Protestant. here, the King James Bible. You might remember early on that the students over at Corpus Christi were working very hard on the translation. That's one of those books in his hand is probably his Bible, and the other book is probably one of the 3 books he actually wrote himself, and they are actually here at the Bodleian Library. So King James himself. Now this, as a library itself, is remarkably important. It's probably second only to the British Library in London. A fascinating visit and a simply beautiful building. James himself gazing down to the founder himself, Thomas Botley, Duke of Pembroke, the guy who actually founded this place in 1610. There he is. So good. Another iconic image of Oxford, what we call the Bridge of Sighs, that one there. It's actually, its official title is the Hertford Bridge. It connects the old and the new quads of Hertford College. It's not as old as you might think, actually. It dates from the early 20th century. I think it was about 1913. But interesting enough, they actually stole the idea from the other place, because they've got one there as well, which dates back to about the 1850s. But again, seeing the kind of classical European style architectural influences coming in there. I mean, also known as the Bridge of Sighs, because occasionally you can see the students going across that might have had a really bad exam or going on, just sighing away to themselves. But that's just over the top of New College Lane there, which would take you down to some great pubs down there, and St Edmund's Hall, one of the many colleges, New College Lane, so Bridge of Sighs. Okay, so we've moved a bit further in now, the Bridge of Sighs away behind us, and we'll look over here, the beautiful building here, again in that classical 18th century style, porticoed entrance out in the great columns. This is the Clarendon buildings, former home of the Oxford University Press. It was here till the 1970s, I believe, until it just expanded massively. The building couldn't cope with the amount of production coming out of there, and they've now moved out of town. It's still very much part of the university this very day, though. Extra storage room for the Bodleian Library, smaller meeting rooms and examination halls. So the Clarendon buildings. Now, on the other side of outside of the Bodleian Library, had I brought you guys down here about 6-7 years ago, all these buildings around us would have been completely black from years and years and years of burning fossil fuels. And as you'll be able to see, after several attempts of trying to clean the stonework, quite badly damaged there. Beautiful limestone, the Oolitic limestone. The problem with it is it's beloved by the stonemasons, I keep referring to. Very workable, but really does absorb the pollutants, and very, very difficult to clean without scarring. But if Greg, to just maybe the top row there, you'll see quite clearly, very smooth, clean surface there. They actually developed a technique not that long ago on how to clean this stonework without scarring it. I'm no scientist, but I believe it's something they use some kind of latex treatment. But you might be interested to know where they actually developed this technique. Was in fact at the other place. Yeah, the scientist there. Now, traditionally, all subjects are covered here as they are at Cambridge, the other place. But traditionally, Cambridge always leaned towards the sciences. Sir Isaac Newton was there, of course, and Stephen Hawking, world famous Stephen Hawking, educated here at Oxford, is actually head of the chair of science at Cambridge, where here at Oxford traditionally it's more about theology, the arts, the classics, languages, law, theology, that sort of stuff. So just to clarify that for you. Oh, this is nice. This is quite simply my favourite little corner of Oxford, and we're just outside the back of the Bodleian Library here, and section here, the library is the School of Divinity. Beautiful. It might look familiar to some of you people, particularly you Harry Potter fans, because this is actually Warner Brothers got access to that beautiful room in there and actually filmed scenes of several of the movies there. In fact, that was actually used as the infirmary. So if you revisit your Harry Potter movies, you'll probably now recognise this, but simply stunning. Again, we've got more crests. Yeah, you probably recognise this one now above the doorway. The dark, well, it's fading dangerously close to light blue from the other place, but it should be dark blue background. Of course, the three crowns, the three divinities, and the open book, the Latin inscription that's illumination through education, the main crest of Oxford University, the governing body. And if I just pan around over here, the beautiful doorway over there, you'll see another crest, which is the crest of actually the School of Divinity. Now, I'm going to just head over to that doorway there, because there's a little piece we want to show you over there. But yeah, School of Divinity. Okay, so just moving to the other side here, getting a closer look at the School of Divinity, but I wanted to show you, this is a nice little one here, little secret thing for you. Not many people know about this, but just above the doorway you'll be able to see Greg's panning in there, this open book with the, it's Greek, I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's Greek, but it's from a passage in the Bible which translates to, all will be healed who enter here, is the kind of rough translation. I haven't got it exactly right, but basically you enter into the School of Divinity, your soul is healed and you're kind of elevated up to heaven. But you can check that out just here off the doorway of the School of Divinity there. Beautiful little secret little thing there. So just walking back down, I'm going to pan over here, and this is again probably one of the top 3 most famous landmarks in Oxford. I brought you to this side because it's a much better view from the other side. That is the Sheldonian Theatre. Now, we've already mentioned the great Sir Christopher Wren. He was at All Souls College. He was teaching astronomy and rhetoric and lots of things, but he was also well known for his architecture at this time. Now, the Chancellor of the University at the time, we're talking the 1600s and 17th century, there was a man called Gilbert Sheldon, and he's the guy that commissioned Wren to put together a brand new ceremonial and graduation hall for the university. Now, Wren said, that's great, I've got an idea actually. There's a theatre in Rome called the Theatre Marcellus, give him some inspiration. So very much in that kind of Baroque style with Wren's influences, using the local Cotswold stone. You'll see there that really deep burnished colour, that's from the North Cotswolds, that really high iron content in the stonework there, and very much a Wren style, Baroque style at the top there. Now you'll be able to probably see, if we're panning from left to right, Greg, there, if you can just sort of bring that in there, the Latin inscription over there, sort of Academia Oxiensi, Oxford University, and then we've got Gilbertus Sheldon, busy man Sheldon, actually, not only Chancellor of the University, but as you can see there, Archbishop of Canterbury, Chancellor of the University, and then the dates there, it's 1688. In fact, he actually wrote for business in 1689, but coming back to the middle, you'll be able to see above the doorway there the Bishop's Mitre, Archbishop's Mitre there, and the crest of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Yes, another crest, of course. And if you just come down a little bit there, Greg, you'll be able to see, I think you should be able to make out a little face peeking out. There it is, and I think that's Sir Christopher Wren just having a little joke with his old mate Gilbert Sheldon, because that is supposed to be Gilbert Sheldon himself. So the beautiful, the incomparable main ceremonial and graduation hall here at Oxford University, that is the Sheldonian Theatre. The rain's really coming in now, but we'll carry on regardless anyway, not to worry too much about that. So we've come to the other side of the Sheldonian, actually. I just want to point this one out. In fact, we actually see on the side of the Clarendon buildings over there, that all is fine, with the great Sir Christopher Wren himself looking at his Oxford masterpiece, the great Sheldonian Theatre. As we've come to this side, we get asked a lot here in Oxford about these heads all around the Sheldonian here. These are known as the 14 Mysteries, so-called, because we've actually got absolutely no idea what they're about. Joking, really, but a couple of schools of thought. Were they the previous chancellors of Oxford University prior to Gilbert Sheldon, or they the protectors of the School of Divinity? But take your pick. I quite like the protectors of the School of Divinity, the 14 Mysteries. Anyway, just before we head off into the broad, another little story for you guys, and particularly the Harry Potter fans amongst you. Now, I'm no expert here, but I'm assuming that most of you know the beginnings of it, that Harry Potter's parents were killed by he who shall not be named, I believe is how his expression. But Harry survives, but he's left with a rather horrific scar on his head, and it is said that this type of scar was giving J.K. Rowling a bit of a problem back at the beginning. She couldn't quite fathom it out, and I'll be honest here, I've never met the woman. If I do, I will actually ask her the question, because it is said that it's right outside here, the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford, that the inspiration for that scar finally came to her. And she was walking around, she's walking around, and she just happens to look down to where we are standing this very day, and she sees this, Greg, can you point this right down here, the stonemason's mark outside the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford. Was finally the ka-ching light bulb moment for J.K. Rowling. She said, that'll do me. So the lightning bolt, but it's actually a stonemason's mark, basically the guys who were laying out the flagstones here. The Sheldonians getting built. So hey, listen, if it ain't true, it's a good story anyway. Okay, so we're on the other side of the Sheldonian now. We're out here on the Broad Street, one of the main shopping streets of Oxford. More of that later, but a better view actually of the front view of the couple of the mysteries there. They're in fact actually recent reproductions from the 1970s, the original ones, just eroded over time. As I say, just panning across the other side of the Broad. In fact, this is quite interesting. Over here we've got Blackwell's, the kind of varsity bookshop, and actually number 48 there, that little blue doorway with the original bookstore itself. I mean, they've expanded massively now. They're all over town and almost departmentalised. For example, you've got Blackwell's music, further we've got Blackwell's arts and stuff like that. So this is on the Broad. Now, back to the pubs. Good idea. Over there, again, another classic, another famous one, the White Horse here on Broad Street. We had a long time ago a great classic British TV series called Inspector Morse. He was a beer-swilling, opera-loving police detective, and if you remember that, and the follow-on Inspector Lewis, this is one of Morse's favourite pubs. If you do go in there, it's all kind of a Morse themed. It's a lovely pub and some great beer in there. In fact, over here, this building here, recently refurbished actually, but that was what they used for the actual police station for Inspector Morse. He used to drive around in a classic 1950s red Jaguar motor car. So that's Blackwell's on the Broad. So right in the middle of the Broad now, and fine view down towards the Clarendon buildings. But I wanted to introduce you to one of Oxford's most famous, or probably infamous, monuments. Just get the pan up the new accommodation block at Exeter College, you'll get a fine view of the spire of the chapel at Exeter College. But if we come to the end here, you'll see this statue of Au Naturel, I think you'd better say. Now, it's a gift. Now, in this country, we've got a very famous sculptor man called Anthony Gormley. Always uses the human form, but his model is actually Mr. Gormley himself. So there he is, ladies, in all his finery. Au Naturel. Quite often you'll come by here and the students are clambered out on the roof and have dressed him up. But sometimes you come here at Christmas, he's dressed as Santa, or last night it was Burns night, so he was wearing a kilt and that sort of stuff. But back to his natural state. So the Gormley monument here at Exeter College, Oxford. So closing in towards the end of the tour now, finishing off here on the Broad, Oxford's oldest street. Just to remind you, if you are walking about, don't do what I'm doing, standing in the middle of the road. Just to repeat that, you can see quite clearly the mode of transport is the bicycle. It's fairly quiet today because obviously not the main body of the university are back just yet, but even so, please, when you're walking about, be very, 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 very careful. The bikes are everywhere and they don't care. Alright, so we're back at the Martyrs Memorial here on St Giles. Now I wanted to share this one with you. Nice bit of urban legend. Now, get a shot of the martyrs there. Some people say that it's actually the spire of a sunken church, and you can actually visit the crypt of that sunken church by walking down these little steps here. If I just get Greg to pan around here, these steps here will take you to the crypt for no charge. All I will say is you might be in for a surprise, but they're free.